This is the bat bomb, a weapon that was actually developed by the United States during World War II in an effort to burn down Japanese cities. This is how it worked. Basically, the gigantic canister you can see here would be dropped from a plane over the target. The canister was filled with over 1,000 tiny compartments, each one containing a small hibernating bat. When it reached an altitude of about 4,000 feet, the bomb would deploy a parachute, at which point the sides of the canister would fall off, causing the bats to wake up and disperse in the area. They would quickly fly to the eaves and attics of nearby buildings, looking for a place to settle in, which is when the timed fire bomb attached to each bat would go off, causing 1,000 small fires that burned down the whole area. The bats would not survive. Now, as ridiculous as this sounds, the actual story behind it is somehow even stranger, because it starts with a dentist and oral surgeon named Lytle S. Adams, who was on a trip to Carlsbad Caverns National Park watching the local bats fly in and out of their caves when he turned on the radio to hear that Pearl Harbor had just happened, and the gears started spinning in his head. Because while most people would be thinking about the geopolitical implications of this attack, Lytle S. Adams was thinking about how he could use bats to fight the Japanese. You see, when he wasn't removing people's teeth, Adams was moonlighting as an inventor, and his prolific inventing had already brought us such hits as a plane that picks up your mail by flying over your house and grabbing a bag of envelopes with a hook. Believe it or not, the development of this idea went so far that First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt saw a demonstration of it by getting in Lytle's plane and watching him pick up some mail. I have no idea how Eleanor came to know Lytle or why she felt comfortable enough to get into a plane with him and fly close to the ground, but maybe she was angling for a free root canal down the line. Either way, it was this interaction that gave Lytle S. Adams a connection to the White House. That's the power of networking. So, a month after Pearl Harbor, Lytle wrote to the Roosevelts and proposed his next idea, the bat bomb. His letter to the president, which has the subheading, "Remember Pearl Harbor," suggests that the US respond to the Japanese attack with another visit in the early hours of the morning. But they'd be carrying something a bit different than explosives. He says, quote, "The lowest form of animal life is the bat, associated in history with the underworld and regions of darkness and evil. Until now, reasons for its creation have remained unexplained. As I vision it, the millions of bats that have for ages inhabited our belfries, tunnels, and caverns were placed there by God to await this hour to play their part in the scheme of free human existence, and to frustrate any attempt of those who dare desecrate our way of life." Honestly, I'm kind of convinced. But if his words to the bat seem a bit harsh, he does go on to say that if the bats help the United States win the war, we will, quote, "erect a monument to their everlasting memory." So at least the bats are getting a statue out of this. The letter goes on to loosely outline his plan, before concluding with, "In submitting this proposal, it is with a fervent prayer that the plan will effectively be used to the everlasting benefit of mankind. Yours humbly, Lytle S. Adams." So how did Roosevelt take this ridiculous concept? Surprisingly quite well. He read the letter and passed it on to Bill Donovan, the director of the Office of Strategic Services, which was basically the predecessor to the CIA. Roosevelt attached a note to the letter which read, "This man is not a nut. It sounds like a perfectly wild idea, but is worth your looking into. Thank you for the vote of confidence, Mr. President." Luckily for Lytle, and unluckily for the American bat population, Bill Donovan loved the idea. He then passed it on to zoologist Professor Donald Griffin, who said it was worth a try. So the president greenlit the project, and Lytle Adams became an employee of the US military. Specifically the Air Force, which was the department chosen to oversee the project. They probably did this because the bomb would be dropped from the air, but I choose to believe it's because the Air Force just handles everything that flies. Either way, Lytle was given a tremendous amount of control over the project. He was allowed to assemble his own team and immediately put together the most Ocean's 11 ragtag group of misfits you can imagine. Here's who he selected for the team. I can't find pictures for all of them, so I'll just put whatever fits the vibe. There was Dr. Jack von Blocher, a mammalogist and bat expert, Bobby Harold, an ex-hotel manager, his brother Eddie Harold, a bodybuilder, Ray Williams, a lobster fisherman who joined the Marines, Patricio Patsy Batista, a former gangster who supposedly worked for Al Capone, the famous Western actor Tim Holt, who was serving as a bombardier for the Air Force, and 2 high school students, Jack Cofer and Harry Fletcher, who worked as assistants in von Blocher's lab. Now there's a group of fellas who could bring this war to an end. Jack Cofer, who ended up becoming an Oscar-nominated cinematographer, wrote a book about this experience called Bat Bomb. Regarding this ridiculous squad, he said, "I think Doc Adams picked them because he felt that they would be loyal to him. He chose them more for personality than technical expertise. It was a very oddball team." Nevertheless, this oddball team got to work. First, they had to agree on the best bat species to turn into suicide bombers, ultimately settling on the Mexican free-tailed bat. Partly because they're only 9 centimeters long at full size, and partly because there are tens of millions of them across North America. So nobody would care if a few of them went missing. And by a few of them, I mean 1 million. At least that's the number of bats they were ultimately planning to use. Lytle Adams actually had to reach out to the National Park Service to get permission to go into the Carlsbad Caverns and harvest some bats. "Hey, do you mind if we capture 1 million bats and set them on fire?" "Thank you." The original plan was to arm the bats with white phosphorus, which would be tricky considering white phosphorus sets on fire as soon as it comes into contact with oxygen. Fortunately, Donald Griffin, the professor who helped greenlight the project, used to be college roommates with Louis Pfizer, the guy who invented napalm. So Pfizer joined this bat bomb squad and helped them equip the bats with napalm instead. They determined that each bat could carry 15 to 18 grams of napalm if you simply glued the napalm container to their chests. Listen, I know this is a cruel process to think about, but try to remember that they're getting a statue out of this. The team then developed the canister, which was a 5-foot sheet metal tube filled with 26 circular trays containing slots for the bats to be held. Oddly enough, this canister was developed by the Crosby Research Center, which was founded by Bing Crosby and his 2 brothers. Now that is how you diversify your income sources. Anyway, each of these bombs could carry 1,040 hibernating bats. Here's a picture of Lytle Adams loading some bats into the bomb. To put these bats into hibernation, they stuck them in ice cube trays and refrigerated them. Once again, the bats will be compensated with a statue. Unfortunately, the early tests were not particularly successful. During dry runs with fake bombs on the bats, some of the bats didn't wake up from hibernation, while others just flew into the sunset instead of nesting in the surrounding area. But things got really bad on May 15, 1943, when 6 armed bats were accidentally released at the Carlsbad Auxiliary Air Base. Some of them nestled next to a fuel tank, and the resulting fire burned down the entire base. Well, nobody can say that it wasn't effective. Still, at this point, the Air Force was completely sick of the entire affair, so they cut off funding to the project. But Lytle Adams was not about to let his bat dreams go to waste, so he chatted up every military official he knew to keep this project alive. This guy would have loved LinkedIn. And Lytle's efforts worked when the project was picked up by America's most down-and-dirty military branch, the Navy. They named the project Operation X-Ray, which feels like someone just wanted to name something Operation X-Ray and did it with the first operation that showed up. So the team packed up and moved headquarters to the Marine Corps Air Station in El Centro, California. They made a few adjustments, then packed up again and went to a base outside Salt Lake City for testing. There, they successfully burned down a testing site that was designed to mimic a Japanese village, which the military had named Japanese Village. So by all accounts, the project was a complete success. The National Defense Research Committee concluded that the bat bomb was much more effective than standard incendiary bombs. A standard bomb could start up to 400 fires, while a bat bomb could start up to 4,748. Unfortunately, the bomb had a bit of competition. Upon returning from a trip to D.C. in 1944, Lytle Adams told his team that a general he spoke to had confused the bat bomb project with another secret project going on, which Lytle described as the silliest nonsense you ever heard of, which is probably the first time anyone has said that about the atomic bomb. With the Manhattan Project making good progress, and with the bat bomb not expected to be combat ready until mid-1945, Project X-Ray was canceled in early 1944 by Fleet Admiral Ernest J. King, who looks like the kind of guy who would cancel this project as soon as he heard about it. It was estimated at this point that the United States had spent $2 million developing the bat bomb, which is around $38 million today. The ragtag team of bat bomb developers went their separate ways. Lytle Adams went on to develop a fried chicken vending machine, which is almost as important. But he never stopped looking back on what could have been. For the rest of his life, he insisted that the bat bomb could have decimated Japan without killing innocent civilians. And when you look at it that way, it's honestly a pretty good idea, especially when you consider that Tokyo firebombing raids in 1945 killed over 100,000 people. Wouldn't have happened if you used bats with napalm strapped to their chest. So perhaps there's another world where America won the war a different way. And instead of a film about Oppenheimer, we'd have a film about a man who brutally murdered 1 million bats to save 1 million people. And as for the bats, oh, don't you worry. That statue will be beautiful. Now please consider subscribing, or I'll change your name to Lytle.